Okay, so this idea of commitment, how I have so many thoughts right now. My mind is like so all of those things that you brought up, it reminds me of like this theory of two things in the workplace that keep people connected. Motivation and hygiene. Hygiene
Yeah,
is like the
good for it.
money, the
Yeah,
working conditions, the
yeah,
tasks, right? And
yeah,
then the other
yeah,
is motivation.
yeah.
The hygiene stuff you can take care of. And money as a motivator, by the way, if you're paying a living wage, money is only so motivating for
Yeah,
people because I can get paid well and still hate my job,
yeah,
right? And it'll show.
yeah.
It'll show. But motivation, if we look at it like from a big picture standpoint, from a leader's perspective, if I have an employee who um, is maybe not performing well, not perform right, because you said feedback, and so part of like a leader's job is to give people feedback, and feedback is both here's what you're doing well and what I want you to continue to do, here's some feedback of what you can do to improve, what are some ideas that you can improve. So feedback is comprehensive, it's both good and bad, and it has to be more good than bad. We talked about that before. It has to be, I have to be able to share with you more often what you're doing right before I can tell you what you're doing wrong.
Right.
With that being said, as a leader, when I'm thinking about how do I give good feedback to somebody to keep them connected, to keep them motivated, to keep them committed to the bigger picture, the feedback that I have to give has to connect back to what is it that we're trying to accomplish here? Because if it doesn't connect back to what we're trying to accomplish and the impact that the behavior has, then people are not going to really buy into the feedback. But then when I'm thinking about how do I connect it back to what's important, like I've got to do a little bit of analysis as a leader of what really is the problem here. So if we're looking specifically at job performance criteria, there's like three things as a diagnostic tool that I would look at. And the first thing I would look at is, do they know how to do the job, right? Do they know how to do it, whatever it may be? And sometimes we think we're really clear with like instructions, but we're not so clear with instructions. So if I'm like, Carl, you need to be on time, that sounds like it's really clear, but people have different interpretations of what being on time means. And so for me, being on time is if it starts at 9, I'm rolling in at 9:04. I'm on time technically. I know I'm late. Don't nobody attack me. But what I'm saying is in my mind, if it's within 5 minutes, I'm doing okay. For other people, if you're anything less than 15 minutes early, you're already late. So when I say, what does it mean to be on time? Let me be clear with that expectation because maybe you don't know. The other thing is too, again, it's the ability. Does the person know how to do the job? Just because someone went to a training doesn't mean they know how to do it. And too many times, like leaders will look and be like, oh, but they went to that training. They should know how to do it. Just because I attended a training doesn't mean I learned. And so that's like my first thought is I don't want to blame the employee yet. Let me maybe be clear on the expectation. Let me make sure they know how to do it, offer some support, maybe give some focused feedback on how they're doing it, what I want them to do. Okay, so that's the
Hmm.
first thing. The second thing that would impact um, an employee's performance is going to be their motivation. So if they don't think it's a good idea, if they don't understand why they're doing it, if they don't think it's a good idea to do it, or it's not important, or it doesn't have impact, I may not be willing to do it. Like I know how to do it, I don't want to, or I don't think I should. It's not my job. It's not. Again, you pay me too much to do this. You don't pay me enough to do this. Like there's a lot of things that go in with motivation. So skill, motivation, and then the last part of that are what are the constraints? And this is like organizational constraints that keep people from doing the job. So to give a quick example, if I said to you, here's how you process this report. And you're like, cool, okay, great. I know how to process the report. And then I say to you, and here's why this report is so important. I'm very motivated to do that report because I can see the value of it. But then the system is down. I have the skill, I have the motivation, but the constraints are greater than my skill and motivation. I can't process these reports that I really want to do if I don't have the system to do it in. So as a leader, and this is not true for all leaders, but I think one of the missteps that a lot of leadership has is that when people are not performing to the level that they want them to, they're very quick to blame the employee. And they're not looking at the system. They're not looking at the big picture to see what is it in the organization that maybe needs to be worked on to remove some of those constraints so that we can focus on the skill and we can focus on the motivation. But if, again, customer service, that's the theme of the day, apparently, customer service. But if I'm saying to you, the most important thing as an organization is that we take care of the people, and we have to take care of the people. The people are our number one concern. But then when I come to you as an employee and say, I'm really struggling right now, I'm having a hard time, my mom is sick and I'm really struggling to be present. And they're like, well, take some time off or get it together, leave your personal life at home. Like, do you really care about people? Because what you're saying and what you're doing don't align. And that's going to be a constraint for me to show up as my whole self, because now I'm not motivated because I'm confused, right? You're telling me the people are the most important thing, but then you don't treat me like a person. And so now I'm not sure what the right thing to do is. Or if I say the most important thing is the people, and here's how you de-escalate an angry customer, and here's why you need to de-escalate that customer. And now I'm giving you feedback like, but do it in 10 minutes or less. Then I'm confused. Like, what is the most important thing? Is it to take care of the people and make sure that I'm empathetic and compassionate and I take care of their issue, or is it to get them off the phone within 10 minutes? That's an organizational constraint. And so this is something as leaders, I think that there has to be like less blame on employees. And I'm not going to say that employees sometimes aren't the problem. They absolutely are from time to time. But what I am saying is that it's greater than just, oh, this person's difficult, get rid of them. Like, how do we grow people and how do we have consistency within the organization so people can be committed to the same thing? And I think the biggest challenge, especially again, we're talking about commitment here, is that leadership, when it's communicated from the top down, don't put the systems in place that support the goal. And so different levels of leadership have different commitments. And so as a staff member, as a person providing the services, I'm getting conflicting messages. And therefore, I don't know how to be committed to the same thing, because what I'm supposed to be committed to depends on who I'm talking to. And so because I'm confused, I just check out and decide,
Yeah.
let me rage apply on Indeed, during this virtual training I was assigned to. Let me use this time to connect with my LinkedIn profile and see who's hiring.
Or you have people who are forced to go outside of the chain of command because they can get, the support, the empathy from other people other than the person that is really ultimately responsible for that. And then they get in trouble because they're trying to be heard when they're not heard by the person that is supposed to hear them. Right. And it's such a challenge. I mean, and you're talking about the idea of expectations, we ended the last episode. You cannot hold somebody to an expectation that they have not been clearly um uh, has not been clearly defined for them, right? So, like you said, punctuality. What does that mean to you to be punctual? To be punctual, right? So,
Fancy punctual.
yeah, right. So, but what does it mean to be punctual, right? Does it mean, because I don't know. I asked, I do an informal survey and I asked people, how many people say punctuality means you're on time or you're 5, 10, 15 minutes early? And a lot of people raise their hand. I said, how many people on time means if I'm working at 9, I get there at 9 o'clock, I drop my bag down at 9, I turn on my computer, and then I go get my water, go get my coffee, go socialize, talk to my friends. And then by the time I come back, it's 9:15, 9:20, my computer's warm, I put my password in, now I'm ready to go. Right.
Yeah.
Or, you know, My definition of punctuality means if your shift starts at 9 o'clock, be ready to see clients at 9 o'clock. Be ready to answer phone calls at 9 o'clock. I don't care if you get there 15 minutes early. If you can turn your computer on and it's ready to go in 1 minute, be there at 8:59. I am not here to regulate your time outside of your working hours. However you want to, whatever your time management schedule is, whatever it is, as long as you're here on a consistent basis and covering, what it is that, you're supposed to cover and being able to help folks. If you're in a team environment, are you supporting your team as well as yourself? If you're an individual contributor, are you ready to get your work done when shift starts? That's to me the definition of punctuality, right? Which might be different than other people's. My daughter right now, her current job, she can be, if her shift starts at 9 o'clock, she can be there at 9:06,
Hmm.
right? She started another job. She's working two jobs, right? And she went to the other job, got there 9:03, and they said, well, you're late. She goes, oh, well, my other job, we could be there. We could be here till 9:06. She goes, well, that's your other job,
Hmm.
right? And so we have different definitions of what it means to be a team player, what it means to hard work. What does it mean for feedback? You mentioned, are you providing positive and negative feedback? For me, another piece of feedback is I want you to feel safe enough to come and talk to me when you feel like I need some feedback. What is it that I'm missing? What is it
Hmm.
that I'm not supporting you in? And I will ask those questions. And when I ask you those questions, I hope I've engendered the trust that you can speak freely and let me know what else do you need from me or from up the chain to be able to facilitate you doing the job that you want to do for your clients who deserve it, right? So that's those things, right? If we just leave them amorphous, you know, attitude, hostile, frustrated, right?
Hmm.
Late, right? We have to get specific. We have to get granular. Common sense is not common, as we've already said. And if we make assumptions, you know what happens, right? I assume they should know this, right?
Yeah.
And you get stand-up meetings where people announce things, and then you get mad at staff because they don't necessarily remember how to do what you announced them to do. Well, 25% of us are audible learners, auditory learners. The rest of us learn visually, kinesthetically, or through written instructions. So you just excluded 75% of your workforce, but yet you're mad at that workforce because they didn't listen to you, right?
Yeah.
So who are we talking to? Who are we engaging with? And very often the answer is us, right? So, I'm looking at how I would want to be trained, how I would want to be teach, how I came up, like we talked about, but that's the challenge. There's so many other people out there other than you, and there's so many other people that you depend on to get work done, especially as a leader. You can't get it all done yourself, no matter how much you try, right? But do they all respond to the same thing you respond to, right? And, so recognizing we have a diverse and individual workforce that all have different needs, but there's some specific things that can really help people feel like their needs are being addressed if we just are intentional in working towards them.
Hmm.
But and the good news is that we have 70% of folks who are not disgruntled, who are disengaged. But more than half of those folks could go either way, right? 30% of folks are engaged; they're using discretionary effort. 18% are actively disengaged, which means they've checked out and they're trying to sabotage your organization, which leaves 52% of folks who come to work, punch a clock, take their breaks on time, take their lunch on time, get done exactly what's supposed to be done, don't ask them to do anything else, go home, right? That's more than half your workforce, 52%, right? A lot of folks would say, well, I'm being engaged, I'm doing just what I'm supposed to do. Well, that discretionary effort is the engagement that raises performance, right? Just punching the clock, doing what you're doing, keeps the status quo, right? And so what does that mean? That means more than half of our workforce can be engaged if we address their needs, and, but they also can be actively disengaged. And there's going to be some folks who are just very happy punching that clock because it feeds their kids, and that's the only thing that they care about. And should we hold that against them? If they're doing that bare minimum, okay, yeah. I mean, it's just like, people say, well, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to do that. And somebody else, I just want to feed my kids. How do I do that? Right. And maybe if you can engage them in something that they're passionate about, connected to family, that might help. But there's going to be some folks who aren't necessarily wanting to play ball. I was at Patton State Hospital a couple weeks ago, and somebody said, well, what do we do for those folks who just want to come to work and punch a clock? I said, well, if they're getting their job done, they're getting their job done. But there's a significant portion of those folks that are getting their job done and just getting their job done because they haven't been shown why it's important to do more. Right? Like you mentioned, the why. The why is the motivation. Why are we doing this? Why are we switching, software? Because it's going to make your job easier. Because it's going to engage folks so that they turn stuff in, more clearly. There isn't missing things that you don't have to follow up with folks. So learning this might be hard, but once it's in place, you're going to have databases that talk to each other. You're not going to have missed information. This is going to make your job easier in the long run. That is something that I can get with, even when it's frustrating and having to learn this stuff. And why can't I just use a system I've been using for the last 10 years? It might have sucked, but at least I knew about it, right? So, that why is so important. And a lot of people think all the why needs to be told is because it's your job. Well,
Yeah.
How do grown-ups deal with because I said so? I mean, Tiff, how do you feel when someone says, just do it because I said so?
Oh, I'm absolutely not going to do it. I'm actually going to do the opposite of it. Even if I know it's in my best interest. As soon as someone says because I said so, I literally become a rebellious 15-year-old teenager. This is make me.
Yeah.
I am not like, okay. So I'm hearing you, and I'm having like this internal war in my mind because as an employer, do I want people to do that, their discretionary engagement and give more? Yes. And I also have to be realistic with what I want from people because how, how ethical is it for me to ask people to go above and beyond more than what I'm paying them to do? Remember, I said this is a reciprocal relationship.
100%.
I'm giving you money to do a job. If you're doing that job for the money that I'm paying you that we agreed to, then I have no space to ask you to do more than what our agreement was. So for me, employees who are doing their job, and I don't even want to say the bare minimum, for those employees who come to work, clock in, do the job that they're being paid to do, and they go home, I'm not mad at them because that's what we agreed to. That is 100% the agreement.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who maybe are interested in something different, that want to give more, they will give more as long as, again, there's something reciprocal. Right. I'm an overachiever. I'm telling you right now that when I'm invested in an organization, I'm always going to go above and beyond because that is my personality. I'm a metiche, and I don't know how to say that in English, but I like to be involved in things, right? That's, I guess, the right word. I'm involved. Involved is a fancy way of saying metiche, but someone who likes to be in everything. I like to be in the know. And so I volunteered for a lot of stuff. One, because I'm really efficient at doing the job. So if I just stuck with what I was paid to do, I'd be bored about, 80% of the time because I'm really good at doing the work. But I would get involved in additional stuff as a way of feeling challenged because feeling challenged is something that's motivating for me. Mm-hmm. I'm not necessarily doing it for my employer. I'm doing it for me. So that the idea of being connected and being challenged and being in the know was something that I really, really liked. And as long as my employer acknowledged the additional contribution that I was making, it didn't have to be monetarily because, again, we chose to work in government. Like, government doesn't have the discretionary ability to be like, you know what, Carl, I'm going to give you an extra bonus raise outside of what the union said I had to pay you. That's not something that you could do. They can't be like, you know what, I noticed this quarter you've done 127% of what we've asked you to. Here's a fat little bonus. That's also not something that happens in government. But But if it was an acknowledgement of, you know what, thank you so much for being the subject matter expert. We have a conference we'd like you to attend on our behalf and you can bring the information back. It's like an opportunity that opened doors. It wasn't monetary. It was like extra responsibility to help me feel connected and feel
Right.
challenged. That was the reward. A lot of times the reward is you are doing so well, you're so efficient and great at your job. This person who's doing less than the minimum, okay, less than them, not what we're paying them to do, but if we're saying you need to produce 20 tasks, they're doing 10, but because it's hard to give them feedback and they're really defensive, and so we avoid the feedback. Um, those extra stuff that they're not doing, can you take that on? Can you take one for the team and do this extra work? And I
Mhm.
might be like, absolutely, I'd love to help. I'm a team player. Here's that extra work. Boom, boom, boom. I'm knocking stuff out, getting paid the same as the person that's playing fantasy football all day on county time. After a while, I'm going to be like, wait, hold up, time out. I'm here doing all of this extra because I'm passionate and I care and I want this stuff to get done. And I'm thinking about the families and the impact. And then this person's over here doing, March Madness brackets, 10 hours out of the week
Right.
and not doing the work. And I'm picking up the slack, but I don't see anything happening to create equity in our work and we're paid the same. That's where I think a lot of the disconnect comes from and the disengagement
Yeah.
because there's not, again, the agreement is I do work for money. Don't ask me to give more than what you're paying me, but make it equitable. So if this person's doing the job and this person's doing the job and they're paid the same, equal effort. And if
Sure.
not, what are you doing as a leader to create that equity? Either you're going to pay me more or you're going to pay them less or something has to change, but you can't have the same compensation for different amounts of work and expect that to have longevity. It's not going to, it might work in a short term. It can never work in a long term.
And you're mentioning compensation, and there's compensation, but there's also a feeling of accomplishment and a feeling of fairness, equity,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there's financial equity, and then there's also personal equity, right? So and what you're talking about, when you have those folks who are not performing, and you breed that culture of folks who come in new and oh, this so and so is going to be your mentor. Tiffany, you're going to be their mentor. And then when they leave, hey, look, here's a pearl of advice. Don't be a star because they're going to give you extra work, right?
Right.
That's that culture that you're talking about. So,
Right.
and if we just let it go, if we just, I mean, if we, I mean, we're always equalizing caseloads because somebody's not holding their end of the bargain in terms of, working through cases, then that's something where people are going to get disgruntled. They're going to get frustrated. They're going to lose that discretionary effort. They're just going to punch the clock because nothing's changing around here, right?
Right.
But it's something where it's important to hold people accountable, right? To create those expectations. There is a level expectation of how you're supposed to get stuff done, right? And, there's, you know, I had to, I had one employee who just didn't want to be there and just rather would not be there. I mean, the sweet guy, but he did not want to do the work. He did not like the work, but it was affecting other people, right? Because he wasn't taking care of what he needed to take care of. And he would call in sick and other people had to take care of his cases and he wasn't organized. It was just a mess. And so, we had to start, where I would meet with my staff and go through their cases, once a month. I met with them every week. And, because we created, okay, here's the expectation. And I'm not sure if anybody's not explained this to you, this is the expectation of what we have here. And this is why we have to hold people to this expectation. If I allow for performance to dip and not to address it and try to help raise expectation, it impacts everyone else on the team,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't have my team of high performers um, feel like they're not in the right place to perform because of one person who I'm letting that go. So I can't, as nice as you are and as much as I want you to do well and treat you, nicely and kindly, I'm going to treat you nicely and kindly while also holding you accountable. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to help you, and the idea was either you're going to get better or we're going to document you not doing better. And then you're going to get what you want. You don't want to be there in the first place. You're going to get what you want. Right. And so, in
It
the end,
helps
if he,
facilitate that. Yeah.
right. And so he didn't want to be there anyway. I mean, he was calling in sick to do other work. He just thought he was going to get fired and collect unemployment. But then HR told him, you're not going to get unemployment because you're working another job. And so dollar for dollar, you're not going to get anything. He said, I wish I would have known that. I'd quit 3 months ago. He said, I
Right.
wish you would have known it 3 months ago too. So,
Mhm.
but you have to hold people accountable. Even if they're high performers, I've had to let people go that were wonderful, that, you know, continuously, repeatedly broke policy, that were, especially even safety policy or, the policy of the organization. And they knew, they knew what the process was. They knew what we had to go through. We had conversations, and I had to let two people go just based off of that. And it was sad and it was frustrating, but the rest of the team also knew why it happened.
Yeah.
Right. And so I've always been, as a case manager, I always said, I've sanctioned many clients, but I've never had a client that said, I don't want to work with him anymore because he sanctioned me. You know,
Hmm.
you're getting sanctioned because of something that you did. I'm going to help you to alleviate that or to cure that or to figure out ways to overcome that. I'm going to do my best. At the end of the day, you're not going to see me having a lack of effort for your improvement. Right. And so that's that's the attitude I come at with leadership, with communication, with connection, right? Is that if you have expectations at the get-go and you clearly delineate them, you hold people accountable to them. And here's the thing, if you haven't had expectations yet, it's never too late to set them. You
Hmm.
can set them tomorrow. Hey, I was just listening to this podcast and they were talking about what it means to be punctual. And so, yeah, I agree with Tiff. You get there at 9:04, that's on time, but 9:04 is it, right? And so, that's a clear expectation. And if people, when you give expectations, more often than not, the research finds people will strive to meet those expectations. But when you do not have expectations, people, you can move the goalposts and people don't know what they are striving for. And so you got to do the extra work. You got to put in the legwork. It's leadership. I mean, that, and people think, you get to be a leader, which means you get to hang out and maybe not work as hard. You're in for a rude awakening, right? Because there's more work and
It's a
and
different
you're
kind of business.
responsible. Yes. And you're responsible for more people. And so how do
Hmm.
we keep a group of performers performing high, right? What is performance? It's motivation times ability, right? So like you mentioned, I have the skills to do the job, so I can train you with the skills. The motivation, how do I help tap in those things that you are interested in doing, right? And that leads to performance. But if, you have the skills, but not the motivation, that's difficult. If you have the motivation, but not the skills, like I said, I can always train you up on that. But if you
Yeah.
don't have the skills and you don't have the motivation, we're in a tough place and you may not make it. And it's okay if you don't make it. There are other jobs for you. I had a manager who we both know that said, I want you to go back to doing what you're doing because I think that's really where you excel and that's where we can use you in the best of your abilities. And I respected her for it. And I love the fact that, she pointed that out and she put me back in that position where, I'm been successful ever since, so, when people can have expectations and have real conversations in a way that explains the why, because I said so doesn't work. You need to do this. You should be doing that. That doesn't work. That's demeaning, right?
Yeah.
But here's why we're doing this. This is what is here. This is where you are. I want to get you here. What can we do to get you here? Right.
Right.
And this is why you need to be here. Like we talked about in the last class, the CBIA. What's the impact of your non-performance? What's the impact of your lack of performance or behavior?
So, earlier you were talking about like being able to meet the needs of the people that you lead, like being flexible. If I have an auditory learner, I need to also have like things in writing and kinesthetic. And it made me think about, again, this idea of commitment. Like we have lots of ways to get to the same destination, right? There's different journeys that you could take to get to
Hmm.
the same place. But I think when we start to talk about commitment and buy-in, it's really that we all have the same collective goal, even if we get there a different way, that there's agreement in what the goal is. And I think that's the commitment piece. Like we do have to have clear expectations that support that what we're committing to.
Yeah.
So from like a big picture perspective, right? So if I'm thinking about like the organizational chart, everybody has different roles and responsibilities. If we're talking about the bottom like operations, their job is to do the day-to-day functions of the job, to meet with the people, to do the work, to do the interviews, to input the things in the system, to follow the rules, to follow policies. That's their
Mm-hmm.
function. You go up, you have key processes. These are like your supervisors. Their job is to make sure the people doing the work have the right resources, training, development, feedback. You have above that structure and culture. This is your management team, making sure that you have the right departments and the right things in place, and that we have the right people in the right positions to do the job that's assigned to them. And, setting the tone for again, now the top of it, strategy. What's our 3 to 5 year plan? What's the goal? Why do we exist as an organization? Like what's that all about? So like each has its role and responsibility. And a lot of times that communication comes from the top down. How often do we allow it to come from the bottom up? But there has to be this collective vision of what we're all here to do. Like we all play on different parts of the team, but we're all trying to play the same game, right? So if I think it from a football perspective, you have offense, you have defense, you have special teams, you have the fans, you have the owners. Like everybody has a very specific role and responsibility on the team, but at the end of the day, everybody's trying to win the Super Bowl. So that's the commitment piece of it, is what are we trying to accomplish? What are the most important things? And that can come from the top, but all of our expectations have to connect back to that commitment. So I have a better understanding from wherever I'm at of what we're trying to do, and then I can adapt and change to meet that expectation. So for example, if I'm going with, let's say, customer service, and by the way, anytime I get called in to do a training on customer service, my first question is almost always, how are employees treated? Because people who are being treated well don't treat customers poorly. Yeah. Period. Put a T on that. If I am treated well and I feel connected and I feel passionate and I feel motivated in my work, I'm not going to be disgruntled by somebody yelling at me or being unhappy with me. In human services specifically, I'm going to go off on a tangent for just a second, but in human services specifically, we work in crisis and trauma. We are working with people who are not at their best, right? There's some kind of current active crisis that's happening that puts people in a position that they're in that fight or flight. I'm in survival mode. So if I've just waited, like you mentioned earlier, 2 hours on the phone because my child is sick and needs medication, I may not be like, hi, thank you so much for answering. I've been waiting for a couple of hours. My baby is sick right here. I'd like to see if you could provide me some assistance. The longer I wait, the more desperate I become because I'm watching somebody I love and cherish suffer, and I feel powerless. I feel powerless in helping my child feel better because I don't have the economic means to just buy over-the-counter Tylenol, because I don't have that money. So in that sense, again, I get so like wrapped up in this one. If a person is being treated well by their employer, they're going to have that compassion. But working in human services, it comes with the territory that people are not going to be at their best. And you have to take that in consideration when you're accepting this type of work, as you are dealing with people in active crisis. And that means they're not always going to be super nice to you. And if that's not something that you can manage, or that's one of your boundaries, that people cannot talk to you crazy, then working in human services is not for you. It's like taking a job at Starbucks and getting frustrated every time someone orders a latte. It's literally what you signed up for. So let's take some accountability there. If you choose a job in human services, you're going to have to deal with people who are not their best. If you take a job in leadership, you're going to have to learn how to lead people and take ownership of how you communicate and how you lead them. That's part of the territory. So, so I'm off my box on that one. Let me come back to this idea of commitment. If I, as a leader, say customer service is one of the most important things, I want, like, if I'm saying let's commit to providing great customer service, accuracy in the work that we do, and service to others, if I'm saying that those are the most important things, then when I create expectations for the job, they have to connect back to service or effect or efficiency or whatever it is, whatever the keywords I
Mhm.
use. So if I'm talking about punctuality and I'm saying it's important that you're here and ready to work by 9 a.m. And the reason why is because we have customers who line up at the door at 6 a.m. to be the first ones in line. And so by the time we open our doors at 9 a.m., customers have been waiting for 3 hours outside. So we would like to make sure that they can be serviced as quickly as possible. And so being on time and ready to work by your starting time is key for us to be able to meet this function. That's why it's important, not because I have a preference that you be here
Right,
15 minutes early,
right. No, and,
right?
and I had, it's that, I had I was in a county and we were having this conversation. Like, and I mentioned if your shift starts at 7:30, you're ready to work at 7:30. They said, well, we have front office staff that need to open up the office, but their shift starts at 7:30. And so, they get here, then they open up. So they're not ready to see clients at 7:30 when the doors are open. I said, well, how about so their shift starts at 7:30? Yeah. So it doesn't start at 7:15, 7:20, to no, right? So you see how if we make a commitment to customer service, but yet we aren't ready to see customers,
Right,
then what are we doing,
right,
right?
right,
What value system was created that made you
right,
say, oh, well, we'll take care of us. The clients can wait. They need to wait,
right.
right? And you mentioned how we treat our staff, the parallel process, right? How you treat staff is how staff will treat their customers, right? And so it's a clear delineation. You see it all the time. And what do we do to treat our staff well, right? And as leaders, here's the problem. How many people get into leadership because it's the next position up?
Right,
How many leaders get into leadership because they say, I want to be a good leader?
right,
You know, and so
right.
And so it might be the next step up where I make more money. So I'm the best accountant on the team. Does that mean I'm going to be able to manage the rest of my team of accountants well, just because I'm the best accountant?
No,
Different skill sets, right?
yeah,
And so if we don't take the time to invest in our leaders, if we don't take the time to invest in their ability to make decisions, if we don't train them in their roles, if you've been a manager for 10 years and then you get a senior role, shouldn't you get some type of training and guidance in that senior management role? Isn't it's a different level of responsibility,
yeah,
And so, but a lot of people just make that assumption, well, they've been leaders. They know what it's like, right? Or that's what the job is. I didn't get that when I was coming up, whatever it is, right? And you said people up for failure. And when people are not prepared, they're going to do what they feel they know how to do, and people beneath them are going to suffer
yeah.
because they're learning on the fly just as much as the line staff learns on the fly when they get to work, right? So yeah.
So let's connect these dots for a moment. We're going up this pyramid. We have to trust each other, like individually and collectively. So I have to be able to trust that my leadership is making decisions that are in the best interest of the organization and that are in line with the things that we said we are, right? The vision, the mission, the values. I also, when we build that trust, can now engage in healthy conflict. And so if decisions are being made that I think are counterproductive to our mission, vision, and values, or maybe there's a better way or a different way to approach a task or an initiative, that I can speak up and have my voice heard. That doesn't necessarily mean that leadership has to do what I'm saying that they need to do, but they need to at least be willing to hear and consider the information I'm providing. So I can engage in that conflict of, I think there might be a better way, or I don't think that this is in line with our direction as communicated. And then once we've engaged in that healthy conflict, this is where we can have the ultimate commitment and buy-in, where everybody is in agreement with the direction. And not because I agree, like, oh, this was the best idea, but maybe this is the best idea and I'm still committed to it even if I disagreed initially. So, quick example of this. You gave that feedback model. I might be like, okay, if this is the feedback model that we're using, this is the skill that I'm teaching. It's the, what was it, Q? I'm so bad with letters. I'm so sorry. Was it the CIA?
CBIA
Yes,
plus F.
CBIA. I need to write that down so I remember it. But if you're telling me the CBIA is the model that we're going to use for feedback, and so moving forward, we've discussed different options for feedback, but we've decided that the QBIAF, I remember the F on that, is the right direction. That's the one that we're going to use. Then even if I said, well, wait a minute, I have this other 3-step feedback model that I like better, but we're like, no, but we've decided this is the best one that we as an organization are going to use so we can have consistency. So thank you for sharing your model. We found that this one is more effective, so this is the direction we're moving. That if I trust that is a good decision, and I have I've committed to the conflict of challenging it, and it still goes a different direction. Now I can commit to it and say, even though I maybe had a different idea, I'm trusting that we've discussed it and as a group that the CBIA method is the best one to use. And so I'm committing to it. I'm not going to go rogue and do my own thing because as a group, we decided this was the best option. So commitment is not, oh, I'm going to say yes. Okay, cool. CBIA it is, and then I do my own thing. That's not commitment. That's the dysfunction. And as a trainer, can I just say, as a trainer, this is something I see all of the time where we have a lot of dialogue. Training, by the way, for anybody who's not a trainer, training doesn't come out of nowhere. There's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes of what do we want people to know? Why should it matter to them? What are the skills? What do you want us to teach? What's the message? Why is this important for this group? Like there's a lot of things that are discussed prior to the development of a training. And then how's the best way to approach it? What content do they need? What's the best delivery method? Like there's a lot of like nuance to it. But with that being said, I cannot tell you how many times that I have participated in training development where we were like, what do we want people to know? What do we want them to do? How do we want them to do it? We get all of the stakeholders together. Yes, now we're in agreement. We do the training. We're all like, okay, training's done. And then the people come out of the training and their leader says, yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. So it's cool that you learned that, but this is how we're going to do it. And at that point now we've deteriorated the trust, the conflict. We're not committed because now we're moving in different directions. And that will lead us to the accountability later. But that's the piece where even if it's not your idea, even if it's not what you would have preferred, once the decision's been made, as long as it's not illegal, unethical, a bad business practice, you have to commit to it. And if you don't want to commit to it, go do something else, right? Go do something else. Go find a different job that's more in line with something you can commit to. Right. I'll give you one little baby example and I promise I'll shut up. But like if I work, like I'm big on being good to people, like I want to treat people well. And so if I went to go work for a company and that company said, okay, here's what we want you to do. Give people an activity and then go through and steal all of their wallets. I'm not going to be like, well, stealing is wrong. I don't think that's appropriate. I don't want to do that. Like, no, but we've collectively decided that we're going to be stealing wallets. We've got a budget shortfall this year. So we'd like to infuse more cash. And the way we're going to get cash is by directly taking out of people's purses and wallets. I'm going to be like, that's not something I can commit to. And if that's the direction that we're moving, then I'm not going to stay working here because I don't buy into that. It's not something I can commit to because it doesn't feel good to me. Now, that's an extreme version of it, but how many other times have sometimes companies committed to something that we know is not good, but I don't want to engage in the conflict, so I go along with it knowing it's wrong? I say nothing, I do it. I'm now an accomplice to that because I don't want to engage in the healthy conflict because I don't trust that it's going to go well for me. And so now I'm committed, but I'm committed to something that's bad.
Yeah.
And I know it's wrong and I feel ugly about it and I hate myself and I go home and I'm miserable and I'm, complaining, and maybe I don't complain. I just drink a bottle of wine when I get home because I feel shitty about the shitty thing that I did that I didn't speak up about. And then that leads to that 70% of people who are actively disengaged in their work because they don't feel good about it. They don't feel like they've committed to the right thing and they don't know how to get around it.
And I think those actively disengaged folks were at one time engaged and they
Yeah,
got,
yeah.
disgruntled. I mean, if 2 out of 10 of your folks are actively disengaged, that means, for me, well, I was ready to do something or, you told me that something was going to happen and then it didn't happen. You pulled out the rug from underneath me. You sold me a bill of goods. You said this was going to happen. Then we're not doing what we say we're going to do. So screw it. And the problem is it's easy to tell those people, go find something else. But if 70% of our workforce is disengaged, 40% of them aren't going anywhere. 40% of
Okay, so
that
I have a problem.
70%, right?
So,
Well,
yeah,
just think about it in government service, Tiff. I mean, how many people, they're not going anywhere. I'm staying here because I've got 28 years in, I'm retired in place, right? Or, I'm just going to go to my union and complain. You can't make me do, or whatever else it is. And people are,
yes, yes, and I'm going to say that's a leadership, that's an organizational challenge
right.
because how do you allow people to stay working? Or no, let me rephrase that. How do you allow people to do a job for money? Okay, because it's a transactional relationship. You are giving me X amount of dollars to do X amount of work, and I am not keeping up my end of the bargain, and yet you keep paying me the money to not do the work and to sabotage everybody else doing the work.
Yeah.
And here's, you brought it up earlier, like people get into leadership because it's the next logical step for them to make more money. But if you're not leading people, you are actively, again, I don't want to engage in the conflict. So Carl, you're not doing your job. And instead of me having this like courageous conversation with you, like, Carl, I heard you say at the meeting that I wouldn't do that no matter what they tell me. I'm not doing that on a mandatory function. I think you think that this is optional. How are you going to get on board with this new initiative? Because opting out is not a choice. So what do you need to get on board and do this thing that we're saying is necessary? And here's why it's necessary. No, I'm not gonna. Well, then you don't get to stay doing the job. You don't get to keep collecting the money for the job that you're not doing. But what happens is that leaders don't always have the skill set to have those conversations. Oh my God, they might call the union. Is the union really going to come in and say, oh, you know what? I know that there's this agreement where they do this job for money, but they're uncomfortable. They're not going to do the job that you're paying them for. Like, let them go to the union. And if you are doing things on the up and up where you're not asking them to do more than what you've agreed to, right, or what they've agreed to, then let them go to the union. You shouldn't have fear about this threat of oversight. If you're doing the right thing, then let them look at it. Let them. But people are afraid of the conflict. Oh my God, it's going to make some noise and I'm going to be uncomfortable. But I'm going to say this. You're going to have your high performers and you're going to have your low performers. You're always going to be making one of those groups uncomfortable. You can't please both. You're always going to be making one group uncomfortable. And the one that people, most counties, I can only speak from my own experience, the people that they choose to make uncomfortable are the high performers. They, instead of giving that direct feedback and holding people accountable for their low performance, they allow people to actively disengage and sabotage. because I don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation, or I'm not sure how to motivate that person or get them back on track. And so because I don't have the skill, I let them wreak havoc. And eventually my high performers who are doing the job of many, many people will either bring down their performance to match everybody else, or they're going to go leave and go do something else. And then I'm stuck. And that becomes the culture of mediocrity in our systems because we don't give the feedback and hold people accountable.
Yeah.
Oh
And
man,
yeah. See,
I'm all fired up right now, Carl. I'm all
that's
fired up.
this is my thing. I love it. But if you got 30% of people who are engaged and almost 20% who are actively disengaged, that leaves 50% of your folks who can go either way. And so it's your actions that are going to very often make the difference, right? And like you mentioned, that to be heard, right? For me, commitment is consensus, right? What is consensus? We don't always 100% agree. How often do you have an entire workforce 100% agree with the subject? But to be given a forum, a platform, so yeah, we're going with CBIA plus F. Well, I always use the SBI model. Oh, well, okay. Well, talk to me about what the SBI model is. Well, it's about situation, behavior, intent. Okay. Well, actually, that is something that's connected to the CBIA plus F model. If you take a look at it, a lot of that's integrated. Maybe there's something that's a little different, but there's a reason why we're going through each one, and I can explain it to you if you'd like. That takes time. That takes a little bit of involvement that some folks say, I don't have time to deal with those people who need all this information. Guess what? People need information. If you don't give the people information, they're going to make it up. And how are they going to make it up? They're going to make it up in their lizard brain. It's going to be the worst case scenario. And then you're going to have a shit show. So what are you going to do with your staff to be able to address those needs? If you have somebody who's disgruntled, you have somebody who is frustrated or maybe is a low performer, are you going to let it fester or are you going to nip it in the bud as much as possible? Are you going to wrap that person in the team and, and see who can help support that person? Or maybe if you're the person who can, provide support for that person, have that conversation. Corrective conversations don't always have to be write-ups. They can start with the best ones are coaching conversations first. And then if there's continuous issues, then you have documentation that you've had conversations with them, and then you can, back that up. I mean, those are things, and I've never been afraid of a fair hearing because I always made sure I had my I's dotted and my T's crossed, and specific things that happen. I never use those generalized words like frustrated or disgruntled. Specifically, this is what happened. These are the actions I took. This is the conversation I had with this person. This is what the person said or did, right?
Right.
And so that is something that like we talked about, when you have those general conversations, it's up to interpretation. When you point out a specific behavior, it's harder to refute, right? And so, just to be able to hold people to expectations, but you have to hold yourself to that expectation.
Right.
I had somebody in a county tell me, Carl, if you're going to talk to my supervisors, please tell them if you want your staff to be on time, they can't come walking in 5 minutes late. That kills credibility right there. That's it. Amen, right? So
I have
I
to
know
tell you a
we're
story about that.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, guess what? We got a lot more podcasts to do. So, just thinking about that, what are some of those tips? Like Gallup talked about those specific percentages, right? And they just had a few tips that were there that are important. You invest in those people managers, right? Invest in folks who are your leaders, right? If you want your leaders to be effective, train them to be effective. Get them into leadership academies. Get them into opportunities to have mentorship with other leaders in the department or other organizations or, whatever it is, network folks, right? Build trust in leaders like we've been talking about, consistency, integrity, setting those expectations, holding your end of the bargain, right? Developing a culture of recognition, right? That positive to negative ratio, recognizing people, for what they do, but also recognizing them as human beings, right? As you mentioned, link employee and organizational goals. This is our goal as an organization. You doing this helps us to reach our organizational goal. You are playing a vital role in what it is that you're doing and developing to our overall goals, right? That's alignment, right? And as long as if anybody has a disagreement, well, I don't necessarily agree. Okay, well, tell me what it is. Okay, so that's your opinion. Here's here's where what you're doing is contributing to our overall organizational goals, right? Grow and show empathy to staff, right? If that person needs that time, if they're having a difficult time with their mom, it's not just, well, go fill out an FMLA form, right? No, have the conversation, right? And then check up on them, right? Check in on them. How are they doing, right? There's somebody's mom might be in the hospital at this moment. You never know,
You
right?
never know, right?
Seek employee input, which means feedback is not just down the chain, it's also up the chain, right? Where you have opportunities for folks to be able to feel that psychological safety enough to be able to have real conversations about some issues that they may see that can improve a situation. Engage the whole person, right? Make sure that that person is recognized not just for what they are producing, but that they are a human being who has a life outside of work and that matters, right? Work-life balance is one of the main reasons why people will leave a job. And then leverage generational expertise, right? Get people involved in places where, some folks feel like maybe the time has passed them or that maybe things are moving too slow, right? Ask for their feedback, ask for their input. What are some things that they can contribute to the whole of the organization so that they feel heard, they feel involved, and they feel like what they say and do matters to other people. So those are just some tips that, come from those engagement surveys. There's plenty of other resources out there on engagement, the CEB group, Gallup, um, you know, um, the Hertzberg theory that Tiffany talked about, two-factor theory, right? Um, Spitzer talks about the 8 great motivators at work. Well, I'm sure we'll probably find an episode for that as well. That'll be a lot of fun, but yeah, I mean, it's a great conversation. We've already gone 2 hours into it. We could probably spend another 6, but so Tiff,
All
how
right,
you feeling?
I'm feeling good. I'm feeling very passionate because I got all fired up on this episode. But I have three hot tips. 3 hot tips here. Um, it's kind of a summary of what you said, but maybe in a different wording. Make sure that you see people for who they are and acknowledge their humanity. Again, people do come to work to do a job, but they also have lives outside of it. And so take an interest in people as human beings, and they will give and give to you as long as it's genuine. So don't let people feel anonymous, that they're just a wheel in the cog. They need to feel like they matter. And I mean, sometimes this is just as important as like knowing what their favorite sports team is or something that they care about. So don't let people feel like they're just a machine, that they're a human being. The second thing is help people understand their impact to the organization, that what they do and what they don't do has a ripple effect, and they need to understand what that is and how they're helping somebody, even if it's just you as the boss. You brought up payroll earlier. Sometimes when I talk to people about like, we're here to fight poverty and abuse, we're here to alleviate suffering in our communities. And someone's like, I just work in fiscal. Well, that's an incredible, you may not be customer facing. You may not be the person in the lobby talking to the person who's in crisis. But if you don't do your part, then we don't have money. If we don't have money, we don't get to provide services. So you are directly helping the people, making the world a better place. So help people in all departments understand their impact and how it connects back to, again, the commitments. What are the major things that we're trying to accomplish? What are the goals? Let them understand how they fit into that. The third thing I will say, the last hot tip I have, is as an individual, regardless of what position you're in, find a way to measure your own contribution. Like find a way of like not waiting for the feedback from other people necessarily, although as leaders it's important to give people feedback, but feedback is just what you observe. As an individual, you have to find a way to stay connected and motivated by what gets you excited about your work. So I'll be honest with you, like when I worked for the county, if I could go a whole day without saying the F word, I was doing big things. I was really like, today was a great day. I made it the whole day without saying the F word at work. I'm really thriving right now. As a trainer and as a coach, I don't measure my success from did I make everybody happy? Because if I measured my success by making everybody happy, I'd be disappointed, except for every single day. So I always measure my success. If one person got one thing from my training, then I did a good job today. If one person got something meaningful from the time we spent together, then I've achieved what I came here to do. And that way I stay connected to the work every single day, even when it gets tough. So I measure my own success, and the feedback I get from other people is just a bonus, but I can acknowledge, like, I did this really well today and I felt good about this. And, ooh, that thing didn't go as well as I thought it would. Here's how I will do it differently next time. I'm in the practice of giving myself regular feedback so I can stay connected. I'm not waiting for anybody else because I have control over me. So those are my hot tips. Acknowledge people, find out what your impact is, help other people see their impact, and lastly, measure your own success. Find a thing that you can look at the end of the day and say, I did a good job today. And that again can be anything that's meaningful to you. That's it. That's all I got for you. Now I'm gonna go simmer down now. Simmer down because you got me all fired up today.
You got my puppy all riled up too, so all right. All right, folks. Well, we will see you once again very soon. So thank you very much for joining us today. And I'm Carl.
And I'm Tiff.
And let's keep it simmered.
Keep it
No, let's
simmer.
keep
You
it
know what?
fired
Stay
up.
hot.
So
Stay
hot.
fired up. That's right.
That's right.
Stay hot. All
And keep
right.
it
Have
real,
a good
everyone.
one. Keep
All
it
right.
real. Bye.